So I'd already moved away at that point, and I called a couple of friends in town who were very interested. And they came out here and tried to restore the parapet. And just as hard as they would work to restore it, somebody else would come back in here and tear it up with more artifacts. This is the nicest piece of the restored parapet here, and it runs 50, 75 yards that way. The nicest piece, I'm afraid you can't see it now, because it looks like the bay's grown back up. It runs that way, all the way into the bay.
It's not bad.
This was it right here. This is the front face facing that way. Post main line. Did they have one or two right here on the road? I think at least four. The federal say somewhere between 6 and 10. When they tried to charge, they exaggerated their reports. They said they thought it was 6, at least 6, maybe. And I've only been able to document one Confederate battery here, which was Thomas Sutherland's horse artillery, which was in Wilmington. And they had 3 or 4 guns. And I think that was about it. And there was at least one brigade of infantry. So I think there were about 1,000, maybe 1,200 infantry in here, just spread out right in here. Because there's another piece of the line that not many people know about between here and Carolina Beach Road, and there's absolutely nothing on it. So it wasn't manned at all.
So would they have had 12-pounders or?
No, they were all 6-pounders.
Horse-pounder?
All of the frags that were found out in front of the mounds were all 6-pound frags and canister balls, little lead canister balls. But the Federal Brigade, which was commanded by a guy named Elias Wright, I think, got within about 75 yards of the front of this line, because most of the artifacts that we found, at least the heavy concentration of artifacts, were just beyond the wooded area here. So they got at least that close and sustained such heavy casualties that they just withdrew and dug in, and then just fired at each other, traded pot shots all night long, while the commander, Terry at that point, was sending out little reconnaissance forces on the flanks to find out a weaker point in the lines.
What kind of artifacts did you find?
Fired and dropped 3-ring minis. Most of the artifacts that were actually found inside the works themselves, I understand, were dropped Confederate 3-ring minis. Most of the artifacts out in front were fired mini balls, lead canister balls, and 6-pound iron fragments from the cannon. And that's about it. It was just a big firefight. It lasted for about 45 minutes, and then off in the morning into the night. But
the Union troops really never got very close to these works.
I don't think he came closer than about 75 yards.
Any casualties?
Quite a few casualties for such a brief period. About 50 Union casualties. All black troops, except for the officers.
What was the cover like out here?
Just like it is right now. Just like it is now. Of course, it was in the middle of the winter. It was this was February 20th, first attack.
So this grass, it was clearer than it is now.
Well, I mean, the Confederates probably cleared off as much of the heavy undergrowth and some of the larger trees out in front of the works, but these things were thrown up fairly quickly. And of course, being in February, the greenery, the shrubs and all was gone. All of this stuff was the same. Stanley can probably talk to you more about that than I can.
Of course, everything was not green. It was all, oaks were all brown, scrub oaks were brown, and I imagine that there was very little growth on these sand ridges except what you've got now.
Yeah.
If you get down into the Carolina Bays, which is on either side of here, that's why it was essential for them to use this high hill to get to Wilmington. It was the only high and dry area between Fort Fisher and Wilmington.
Now what would they do, send out a scout that figure all that out?
Well, this was a regular highway. This was not just a path or anything. All of the people that lived on the south end of New Hanover County had to use this road, except maybe over towards the ocean.
I think you've told me that you used to hunt up and down this road.
Yeah,
didn't you?
yeah. Hunted
And
them.
it was well traveled well into the 1920s, 1930s. That's the way you got to and from Carolina Beach.
Yeah.
And just up there at South 17th Street is where it splits. You can go that way toward Masonboro Sound. The only way to get to Masonboro Sound. Probably into the 1920s, I guess. And you went this way to Carolina Beach.
The fortifications, the backup fortifications that we'd like to see today are at Cape Fear Country Club too.
That's the only piece that's left.
Get a shot relating the road to us.
That's the only piece that's left. The fortifications that were just outside the city, approximately a mile from the city at that point, ran on the north side of Greenfield Lake, across what's now 16th, across the ridge of what is now 16th and 17th Street to Cape Fear Country Club, and there's a little piece of the line still between the 9th and the 1st Fairway.
That's right.
I can remember playing on that rough quite a bit when I was a kid.
When we leave this area, we'll go by there, and we'll pick up.
We can go by and take a look at it.
Yeah, we'll pick up a golf cart and ride out there.
Yeah. And I suspect that I guess it's still the 18th hole. They've changed it between the 9th and the 18th. But what has been the 18th hole for the most of the course's history, I think, was the part of the bastion where the lines made the turn and went north across Oleander Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And then across Wrightsville Avenue, right there at the Creek Apartments, and then ran along Burnt Mill Creek all the way to Smith's Creek, and then anchored on the river up there. I mean, it's very heavily fortified, the entire city. And that's where most of the guns were found when they captured the city. The federal reports say we found approximately 40 pieces of artillery in and around the town, and most of them were in that line. I suspect, I never read any report about this, but I suspect that Bragg figured that if the Federals got that close that they could possibly lay siege to Wilmington and destroy it. He didn't want to see that happen. So after Fort Fisher fell, he designated certain areas, certain lines to withdraw to, in case they had to abandon Sugarloaf and Fort Anderson, which of course they did. And that's when these lines were thrown out.
What was this named?
Well, I've just called it Hoax Lines, but old timers have known it as Jump and Run, the lines of Jump and Run.
Now, Jump and Run is 3 miles further.
That's right, much further that way.
That's the closest to the country club.
That's why where there's Jump and Run development.
Yeah.
And of course, when he started developing that property down there, he took a deep interest in the battle, and I said, well, the battle was 3 miles away. Mm-hmm. But they did find some artifacts on Jump and Run because of the Confederate lines that are just at the top of the hill at Cape Fear Country Club.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what Doc told me it had always been called. So when he was a kid, that he'd always heard it called the lines of Jump and Run, the Battle of Jump and Run.
If you were shooting something here, how far would that go? How far did those guns?
Well, they had an effective range of fire, 300 to 400 yards. You could fire them as far as 1,000 yards, but effective range of fire was 300 to 400 yards.
Where would the 6 mile line be, or something like that? I was talking
there was what was called the 9 mile line, which were lines that were proposed by Whiting to be built across that tremendous sand ridge just before you get to Snow's Cut.
Mm-hmm.
You can follow it all the way from River Road to Carolina Beach Road, and it's a tremendous 50-foot high sand ridge, but no works were ever built on it. Now you'll see it on federal maps, but they were never built, and they're just not there. During the federal advance into Wilmington, they stopped at what they called the 9 mile post, meaning that they were approximately 9 miles from Wilmington. And in fact, artifacts have been found from Terry's encampment on Carolina Beach Road, just south of Totem Zoo, which is approximately 9 miles from the old city limits.
There's a gift shop there called...
There's a gift shop right there, and the lines ran right across the road.
Yeah.
Up until about 1980, you could see a good part of it.
Those were Terry's lines?
Those were Terry's lines. Terry, commanded the advance on the east side of the river, and Cox, of course, the division commander from Schofield's Corps, which was sit down here to reinforce Terry, advanced on the west side against Fort Anderson, the town of Green. And that's really where the Wilmington campaign was won over there.
Was the use of black troops supposed to be a political statement in the South? Is that why they did it? Or is it just accidental?
You mean for this campaign particularly? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't think it was a political statement. The first Fort Fisher
expedition was to be commanded by Godfrey Weitzel, or was to be commanded by Godfrey Weitzel. His commanding officer was Benjamin Butler, who was the commander of the Army of the James. The Army of the James were all black troops. Butler was the commander of the Department of Southeastern Virginia and North Carolina. So it was from his command that the troops were drawn for the expedition. A number of white troops came along too. That's why I don't think it was any political statement. This is one great story. I should have probably put a footnote in my thesis. After Fort Fisher had fallen, and Terry, who had hoped to go ahead and continue the advance right on to Wilmington right after the fall of Fort Fisher, was constantly probing hoax lines at Sugarloaf. And one afternoon, and most of the reconnaissance forces were made up of these black troops who were commanding the forward line. And one afternoon, this Illinois soldier wrote that some black trooper came back in, said that said, "I got him, boys, I got him, I got my massa, I got my massa." Supposedly he'd captured his former master. You know? Oh no, true it is.
It's a good story anyway.
I said, "What you gonna do with him, boys?" "I don't know, but I got him, I got him."
So we walk on, is there something
let's just walk down and see. I want to see how prominent the lines are.
Somebody's been digging in this one, as you can see.
Now when it burned off, you can imagine with all this stuff.
Yeah, about 50 yards that front line. We can crumple it around and spot them up.
Those would be picket posts.
Just a little white and shit.
How far would you say it actually extended?
Another 20 yards. This is about it. This has all been burned and timbered in here, and Stanley can attest, those Carolina bays are just thick, and you can't penetrate them.
You could not penetrate them with anything.
And this is as far as lines went, and they just figured that the Federals wouldn't try to flank them on that side. And you couldn't, all the way to what, 132?
132, so you had not only this bay, there are three bays. There's that round bay over on that side. This bay is called Blythe's Bay, and it goes up behind Bruce Cameron's house. Then there's this, which is inclusive of Pine Valley. Then the next Carolina Bay over is the one where Lincoln Forest is.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes all the way over to Oleander.
Now, Doc Treadwell told me that at one time, when he was building his house on 132, that there was a little piece of a line that ran across 132, across the what is now the YWCA property, and into Hugh McCrae Park. But there's no evidence of that anymore. So they may have tried to extend them all the way to the Sound. But,
Stanley, what do you mean exactly by the definition of a bay?
Several million years ago, they haven't really laid it down, there was a meteor shower that struck southeastern North Carolina and southeastern South Carolina, northeastern South Carolina, that came down from the northwest. Aerial photographs, it's very obvious. I'll just get up in an airplane, you can see them. These are elliptical shaped depressions in the earth that happen from, say, Myrtle Beach up to the Virginia line. They came in at such an angle that they struck the earth at like a rock skipping on water and bounced on out into the ocean. And I was telling Richard that the chief forester at Federal Paper was telling me that in digging dragline ditches like this one over in Green Swamp, they had gone through these bays, and when they would hit them, they would dig up trees, which there's a very few of them left now around, this white cedar, and it is like cypress. It is impervious to water. It will stay in water. These trees were all knocked over in the same direction, northwest southeast direction. They were broken off at the top, broken off at the bottom, charred on one side, and when they dug them up out of the water, which was about 12 to 16 feet deep. They all smelled so strong of fresh cedar. He said it was just amazing to dig these things that were thousands and thousands of years old up.
Lake Waccamaw. and
Lake
White
Waccamaw,
Lake.
White Lake, all of the lakes, the Bladen Lakes are these. They range anywhere from maybe a half of a city block up to as big as Lake Waccamaw.
Did you get those names? Were they on early maps or something? The bays right in?
Uh,
Were they named that from early?
There's a book that I have by a professor from, isn't that our librarian?
Beverly?
I think that's Beverly.
She was... Beverly?
No, I don't think.
Okay, that might not
She
be.
couldn't get off.
No, that doesn't look like Beverly.
All right.
That looks like
What happened was that the Carolina bays that were made always were shallow depressions that had no way for the water to run out. See, you'd have nothing but a bay or a swamp area. Since it was dug out on flat land, it would be similar to a Pocosin, a flat hill like the Indians used to say, and had no drainage, so all that would gather in these things would be sphagnum moss and thank goodness fly traps and that sort of thing. That's why people, the old timers used to say, thank goodness we know where they came from. They came from outer space.
few million years, they'll be giant. Consume the world. Well, they were impenetrable as far as the troops were concerned. You couldn't walk through them. Fully equipped or stark naked, you couldn't get through them. So the fighting, strange enough, ranges all around the east side of this little round bay, but there's nothing in the bay at all.
You can get up here and you can see the bay over on the other side of the Federal Point Road. You can see this one. It's a very limited and narrow accessibility to Wilmington.
Well, y'all want to go to Terry's camp and find those too?
Yeah.
So the engineers would have been the ones who figured all this out.
Right.
Chris,
Probably constructed by slaves.
see that clearing right up there?
Mhm.
That's the road. That's 17th Street Extension.
Oh, I see.
See it? That's where it's going. See the red marker up there? That's where it's going through. And it's going right straight on through. And if next year this time, this will all be gone.
I took some photographs. Fortunately, I took some photographs of the features before they were torn up. So I've got 2 or 3 dozen still photographs, black and white photographs of the line.
So what we're getting this morning might be referred to as a last look at some history.
That's it.
That's it.
And this is all
be
they're
gone
getting
by.
ready to develop all this?
This will all be destroyed.
10 years from now, this will be downtown Wilmington. Well, planning department doesn't have it that way. This will be residential.
Well, we'll be all in gridlock, so they won't be able to get here.
That's right.
There's a great story in Sprunt's Chronicles of Cape Fear where they talk about going on the old seaboard coastline from Wilmington down to Riceville Beach, and you had to go through the old Confederate fortifications that ran along Burnt Mill Creek. They were still there at that point. Of course, they're now gone. So I'm afraid we're going to be the last generation to see the last of the last.
You've been refollowing all that article in Virginia?
Oh, absolutely.
That's been interesting.
I'm going to walk this way and see if I can't spot one of those lunettes.
Yeah, I
can
want
see
to
that
see
too.
that.
Did you buy it for us? You gave it to
Yeah.
After we did the sword story.
A lot of vegetation.
You ready? 3, 2, 1. Chris, is this the last chance that most of us will have to see what's left of the Confederate forces?
Unfortunately, I'm afraid this is going to be one of the last opportunities. They were just tremendous.
I really thought they would
The green stuff.
as you know, South 17th Street will be extended through this area to connect with 132. And this is it. Some of the last of the Confederate works built to defend Wilmington.
And this was used to slow the advance of the federal troops that took over
I'm sure people
After
have been all
Fort
through here and
Fisher
haven't known what
the
it is.
importance of Wilmington fell dramatically as far as the Confederates were concerned. Because of course Wilmington was primarily a haven for blockade runners through which supplies were sent to the troops in the field. So Wilmington lost most of its supporters after Fort Fisher fell. However, it was important that the stores that were, and government stores, supplies that were stored in Wilmington at that point be removed. There were a great many stores that needed to be removed. So they needed to slow the federal advance down. Also, the Confederates at Wilmington needed to protect the flank of the retreating Confederate forces from South Carolina as they moved back from Sherman's advance. So in that sense, the Confederate defense of Wilmington was a success. They did remove most of the stores which were transferred to Raleigh. General Hardee evacuated Charleston and got out of South Carolina successfully. And the Confederacy lived on to fight another day.
What happened back here in these woods? Would that even be a footnote in most history books?
I'm afraid that the Wilmington campaign has been a footnote in most history books. I plan to change all that.
You've spent a long time doing that, haven't you?
I have. I've compiled research for about 15 years and just completed my MA thesis on the Wilmington campaign and we're in the process of expanding that thesis for my PhD dissertation to include a more detailed examination of the Fort Fisher battle. So Richard, this was really the Confederates' last stand before Wilmington was evacuated on the morning of February 22nd. A battle raged here for a good part of the afternoon of February 20th between Charles J. Payne's division of black troops and Robert F. Hoke's, one brigade of Robert F. Hoke's Confederate troops. And we've been exploring the lines along which Hoke's troops were stationed.
Even with what's happening back here, the development and all, have we managed to hang on to our history a little better than most places?
Oh, I think we have. What's that? Because of the wonderful efforts of many of the people that we have here this morning and yourself.
It's a purge.
I think it's important for us to pass on to future generations our history, our heritage. This just happens to be my particular interest in these people, and you take a deep interest in Civil War history and theory too. So I think through these efforts, through our writings and our teachings, that yes, it's very important, and we'll continue to.
This is Pine Valley School, elementary school, Jeb Stewart, and right across the street, this is the breastworks.
What is the name of this kind of fern?
It's just woods fern. I'm not sure of the common name of it.
Right here, isn't this wild azalea?
That's honeysuckle.
Oh, that isn't an azalea. I thought that was a wild azalea.
That's honeysuckle.
But that's not like the kind of honeysuckle I don't know.
That's there are 4 or 5 different types of wild honeysuckle.
Got a match?
No, wish I had.
So we can really see them.
Yeah, we should do that. How far down, Chris, does this go?
About it. They peter out from about here on. We found artifacts all behind them though. these were not the nicest part of the lines, just behind the school.
You go right through the school?
They were this high, right behind the school. And of course, they've all been pushed. They were pushed about 5 years ago. But you used to be able to stand around the Federal Point Road and see the lines that ran off to the west. You could follow it all the way around to the fish hook. And I guess there's probably pieces of it still over there. A little more time.
This line went eastward how far?
Right in here. This was just Terry's encampment. So this was just a fortified encampment for 2 nights, just prior to the fall of Wilmington. And of course, the advanced troops, Payne's troops, were fighting that battle at Forks Road. And this was just where the white brigades were safely encamped, while the blacks trying to
Did
take Wilmington.
they use slaves to throw up these things?
The Federals used soldiers. Most of the Confederate defenses were built by slaves. And I suspect that a great many slaves were used in building Coast.
Now this line went to the left how far? To the west?
It went west probably half a mile. It was a tremendous encampment. There were about 8,000 troops back here. No, that's not right. Payne had about 5,000 troops back here.
This line extended into the line at Fish Hook. Is that all the same line?
This line extended all the way across behind Pine Valley School, all the way to that paved road. Across the paved road for another 300 yards, and then fish hooked around.
Fish hooked?
Fish hooked around, right at one of those bays down there.
So from here, where would the Federal Point Road be?
That way west. The paved road is built on top of part of the Federal Point Road, and then that little sand road that I showed you to the west side is the Federal Point Road. And at one time we could walk from that point all the way to Sun Valley. And that's where the ponds are, Stanley.
Ponds
Ponds are north of...
The ponds are north of here?
Well, sort of northwest.
I got you. I didn't know that. I thought they were down
Where
there.
we met this morning, is that called Sun Valley?
That's called Sun Valley.
That's a...
Just butts up against Pine Valley. Jeb Stewart, Charles Payne and Robert Hope drive.